Tartaglia or Childe is a Hydro Bow DPS character that is the only stance changing character we currently have in the game, and has, in my opinion, one of the most fun gameplay loops available in Genshin Impact. This, coupled with the fact that he does excellent burst damage and amazing Hydro application, makes him a very fun character to play, especially when paired up with a grouping character like Kazuha or Sucrose. And with Tartaglia getting his third rerun banner, I figured it'd be a good idea to give you guys another build guide, an updated build guide on Tartaglia. But before we actually get into it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you enjoy my Genshin Impact content, as it helps me out a ton and I deeply appreciate it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and show off Tartaglia. So first of all, it's pretty important to know how Tartaglia works, and he has some interesting mechanics. First of all, he has a typical normal attack of a bow character, but he does have this whole mechanic that he works off called riptide. This riptide mechanic can be applied by a charge shot with the bow, and depending on how you hit an enemy marked by the riptide effect, changes the way that it reacts. Riptide flash is procced when an opponent marked by riptide is hit by a fully charged aim shot, causing AoE hydro damage. Riptide burst is defeating an opponent affected by a riptide, creates a hydro burst that inflicts the riptide status on nearby opponents. This also translates to his E skill, where you move from his bow stance to his melee stance, where he utilizes a multitude of weapons made of hydro, and you deal hydro damage now, and this gets a whole different normal attack and charge attack combo, and this also gets the effect called riptide slash. Hitting an opponent affected by a riptide with a melee attack unleashes a riptide slash that deals AoE hydro damage. Damage dealt in this way is considered elemental skill damage, which is going to be important for some weapons and can only occur every 1.5 seconds. The biggest drawback to this E skill is after 30 seconds, or when the ability is unleashed again, this skill will end. Tartaglia will return to his range stance, and this ability will enter a cooldown. The longer he stays in his melee stance, the longer the cooldown, so you do get a penalty, and you are going to want to be on the melee stance for only a certain amount of time to optimize your rotations with your team. Because of its two different stances, Tartaglia also gets two different elemental bursts, where his range stance does a big AoE hydro damage, and it also gives you a little bit of energy return. It's 20 energy, which is pretty darn nice, but then his melee stance does that same big hit of hydro damage, but it does more damage than the range stance. You can see here at a level 8, it is about 142 or 140% more than the range stance there. And then you also proc this Riptide Blast. When the Obliterating Waters hit an opponent affected by Riptide, it clears the Riptide status and triggers a Hydro Explosion that deals AoE Hydro damage. Damage dealt this way is considered elemental burst damage, so that's also going to be important for different weapons and is something you're going to want to consider. So the range does less damage, and the Riptide Blast procs whenever you hit an opponent affected by that Riptide status mark. He also has this sweet passive here where the Riptide duration is extended by 8 seconds, but the most important is definitely the Sword of Torrents, where when he's in his melee stance, dealing a crit hit with his normal or charge attack can apply the Riptide status, so you don't have to do a charged bow shot to get the Riptide status on people. This is absolutely pivotal and amazing for his kit, and I probably wouldn't play him if he didn't have this. He also has a very unique passive talent, Master of Weaponry, where he increases the entire party's normal attack by level 1, which can be pretty nice for some of your units that focus on their normal attack. Other things you're going to want to know about these talents is the fact that the E skill is considered normal and charge attack damage, and basically just replaces his normal and charge attacks, and it pretty much works how you'd expect, except for a few cases, but for the most part that is basically how that works. Just replaces his normal and charge attacks entirely, and it has its own new set. Another big thing that I mentioned previously is the fact that you are only going to want to be on his E skill for a certain period of time, because otherwise you are going to be on cooldown for a very long time. You can see the max cooldown, if you had him in his E stance for a whole 30 seconds, is going to be 45 seconds, which is a very, very long time. So you are only going to want to be in that E skill for a little bit, and we'll talk about optimizing that rotation later on in the video. In terms of constellations, this build will be C0, and if you want to know my thoughts on his constellations, they aren't too amazing. He has some pretty nice quality of life ones, but nothing that entirely changes the character like some of the other 5-star constellations that we've seen in the past. I'll briefly go over them so you can pause and read them if you'd like. As for artifact sets for Tartaglia, he basically has a set made for him. The Heart of Depth 4-piece was essentially created for him, to where you get some extra Hydro damage bonus, and casting the elemental skill is going to increase your normal and charge attack damage by 30% for 15 seconds, which is pretty darn sweet. And yes, that is going to count for both times you hit the E for being in his for going into his melee stance, and then also if you choose to hit the E to come out of it and you want to do some bow normal attacks, it's going to count for that as well. So that's pretty interesting, but that's definitely not the recommended way you're going to want to play them. Just an interesting thought. You also do have another option of the 4-piece Shiminawas since Inazuma came out. This is a pretty sweet set for him as well, because when you cast your elemental skill at the cost of 15 energy, you gain a higher modifier for his normal charge and plunging damage than the Heart of Depth set would give you. And this is pretty cool because of the fact that one of his most optimal rotations is using the bow elemental burst and then going into his E to do some autos and then swapping off to your other characters. And this is pretty cool because of the fact that the E refunds you 20 energy, which is going to be giving you a surplus of 5 energy after using your burst, and you're still able to proc this artifact set's passive whenever you want. So this is a pretty sweet option, but the Heart of Death here is definitely a lot less thinking, and you don't have to worry about your energy regeneration at all. So I think this is probably the best overall, because the damage you get from this isn't significantly higher or anything. So I would just recommend going for the 4-piece Heart of Depth if you want, but if you already have a really good Shiminawas, then go ahead and slap that on him. You're not going to be worse for wear. However, I will say this does kind of turn off you being able to use your melee elemental burst, sort of, only because of the fact that if you use your melee elemental burst, then you'll be at 0, and then you're not exactly guaranteed to have that energy the next time you want to proc the passive on Shiminawa's Reminiscence. Of course, you can still get that energy back from cycling through your other characters, but it is something you're definitely going to want to consider, and may change up your rotations that you may have had otherwise if you're just using 4-piece Heart of Depth. Of course, you can also use some split sets. You could do like 2-piece Heart of Depth and 2-piece Gladiator, or 2-piece Heart of Depth and 2-piece Noblesse if you want to go for the big elemental burst damage. Those are all entirely options. You could even go like 4-piece Lava Walker if you just want to go like huge Vaporize proc or something. That could be pretty fun, but it's certainly not going to be the most optimal. But overall, I would say the easiest thing you could probably go for is definitely the 4-piece Heart of Depth. Main stats for this artifact set are going to be attack percent, hydro damage bonus, and either crit rate or crit damage, whatever is going to get you to that best 2-to-1 ratio of 2 crit damage for every 1 crit rate. If you can't get to a 40-80 ratio, then I would recommend, of course, doing that attack percent, but ultimately you're going to want to shoot for that good crit rate and crit damage ratio. And when it comes to substats, you are going to want to home in on crit rate and crit damage as per usual. Attack percent is going to be nice as well, but definitely not mandatory. Crit rate and crit ratio are going to be the most important. Higher crit rate on Tartaglia is pretty nice, especially because he has that passive where that you get the Riptide proc on the enemy based on a crit hit. So having a little bit higher crit rate is really nice on him, but you're still going to need that crit damage to make sure you're optimizing. As for energy recharge, you don't really need much on him. A little bit goes a long way, because most of the time you are going to be using the bow elemental burst, and you're going to be getting 20 energy back, which means your cost is only 40 on the burst. So getting that energy back for his elemental burst isn't that hard, so you don't really need that much energy recharge. So crit rate and crit damage are the top priorities, and then if you get some nice cherries on top like attack percent and elemental mastery, those are going to be fantastic, especially for the big vaporize hits with elemental mastery. That is going to go a long way, and those are the stats that you're going to want to focus on the most. Now I'm briefly going to go over all of my artifacts, so if you want to check out them individually, then feel free to pause in the video. For weapons for Tartaglia, you'll be happy to know that he has a lot of flexibility when it comes to this. Weapons like Viridescent Hunt and the Rust are going to be fantastic 4-star options. You can use something like the Stringless if you want to go for the big elemental burst damage, and this does help out your elemental skill damage a little bit, but it's certainly not going to be optimal for him. However, this is something you might want to consider if you are just going for that big one-hit damage number. Things like the Windbloom Ode aren't necessarily the worst, but I definitely don't think they're the best either. And the brand new craftable Hamayumi is actually a fantastic option for him. So if you don't have any of these gotcha weapons, I would highly recommend just using Hamayumi, because it increases your normal and charge attack by default, and that increases based on your energy percentage, if it's at 100 or not. And you also just get this sweet attack. I personally need the Viridescent Hunt because I need crit rate on my Tartaglia. However, there is one thing about the Viridescent Hunt that you want to consider is, one, the fact that the Viridescent Hunt is extremely good for Childe because of the fact that he wants his opponents bunched up, because his riptide slashes can proc other riptide slashes, and you'll just do absolutely ludicrous amounts of damage to a grouped up bunch of enemies, and this keeps them all in that circle, so you just continue to deal that ludicrous amount of damage. Not to mention the fact that this also deals a little bit of damage itself, so it's actually quite the nice bow. And if you don't have a 5-star option, this is going to be one of the best in slot for him in terms of the 4 stars. Things like the Alley Hunter are also going to be amazing. If you have the Alley Hunter, that's actually really good on him as well, especially since he's only on the field for a little bit. The negative part of the Alley Hunter isn't going to matter as much on him. But yeah, if you have Rust or Viridescent or something, I would pick whichever one is going to feel better to you or round out your kit the best. And just to iterate on a couple of the bows that I don't have, things like the Blackcliff Warbow here aren't too bad. As I said, the Alley Hunter is actually really good, and then things like the Skyward Harp are going to be great. The Polar Star is basically tailor-made for him and currently on the weapon banner, so if you have the money for that, then go ahead and go for it. If you want to go all in a Childe, I don't recommend summoning on weapon banners though. But the Thundering Pulse is actually also very, very good for him, and only slightly worse than something like the Polar Star. Overall, they're basically the same in terms of damage, so if you are going to go for 5-star weapons, then I would consider that as well. So as you can see, whether you're pay to play or free to play or somewhere in the middle, you have plenty of options for Tartaglia. Now, if you are very early game and you're looking for some 3-star options for him, I will say you can go for things like the Slingshot or things like the Raven Bow here that increases your damage on Hydro opponents. They are not too bad. The Slingshot, however, I will warn you, this passive does not proc on his E stance, apparently, is what I'm told, and the only reason you'd be running is just for the crit rate stat stick, especially if you just really need crit rate or something, you don't have the Viridescent Hunt or something, that could really help you out a bunch, but definitely move on to something like the Hamayumi as soon as you can. Alright, that's going to be it for the build, but I will be showing off my attributes here. I'm at 1600 attack. I've got a decent crit rate and crit damage ratio, so this is definitely not a super broken Tartaglia build. I am very unlucky on my Tartaglia artifacts overall, I've got to say. I've got 107 elemental mastery, which is okay, pretty darn good for the vaporized procs, and then my hydro damage bonus here is 83.2%. So this is a rock solid Tartaglia build, nothing too insane. Level 8 talents on the ones that matter. You're going to want to prioritize his E and the elemental burst, and then the normal attack if you ever do shoot his bow or something and mess up your rotation. I kind of like to have it leveled up a little bit, but you definitely can just leave it at level 1 if you really want to. Team compositions for Tartaglia are actually pretty sweet. He fits into quite a few categories. You can fit him in really strong electro charge comps, which could be things like Beidou and Fischl, or Beidou and the Raiden Shogun or something. He also pairs extremely well with grouping characters like Kazuha or Sucrose, especially since those Riptide slashes can proc of each other and you just deal a bunch of damage in an area. So if you're dealing with a group of mobs, he can just absolutely pop off. He's also really good in freeze comps just because of his sheer hydro application. Can be really good with your cryo characters like Ganyu or Chongyun even. The Chongyun enchantment won't work on him, but basically anybody that is going to be applying cryo, he's going to be good with for a freeze comp. He's also, as I said and mentioned previously, really good for vaporized comps. Pairing him with a character like Bennett is really strong because Bennett can not only apply the pyro, but buff him up an insane amount, and you can just get a really huge elemental burst number. He also pairs fantastically with Xiangling for the reverse vaporize, because Tartaglia's hydro application is so fast that you are always going to have hydro applied to the enemy, and Xiangling can take advantage of that and deal very big damage with her elemental burst. I actually have a little bit of a showcase of that on my Xiangling build video that we did recently if you want to check that out. Now, one big thing I didn't mention is the fact that Tartaglia undoubtedly has downtime because of the way his E skill works, and if you really don't want to think and play super optimally with it and care about the downtime as much, you could just simply have another premier DPS on the team. Somebody like Hu Tao is actually a fantastic option to pair with Tartaglia and happens to be on the next banner because of the fact that Hu Tao has a little bit of downtime, but she also increases the team's crit rate, and she also has a big hitting elemental burst similar to Tartaglia, and swapping from one or the other is going to guarantee you a big vaporize hit on their elemental burst respectively, which is pretty cool, and they're very fun to pair together. And if you have a couple of good supports with the both of them, you can really start to take advantage of their strengths. All right, so we're going to show him off here with Kazuha and Bennett, and I just got Kokomi on the team just to get the shield down. I'll kind of show you guys, you know, the big PP damage that he's capable of here, just so you guys have an idea, and then we'll show him off in the Spiral Abyss. And you see when you get him buffed up a bit, you can go ahead and do like 90Ks there pretty darn easily. He does set up extremely well with a character like Bennett, and you know, grouping characters like Kazuha help out a ton. But let's go ahead and show him in the situation that he thrives in, which is a situation where there are a lot of enemies. All right, so we're going to clear floor 12 chamber 1 here in a traditional reverse vaporize comp for you guys, just so you guys have an idea of how he works in one of his best teams here. And you can see, as I said, a lot of the damage isn't going to be from him. It's going to be from the kind of supports, but he's just going to facilitate all of that. As you can see, pretty much everything died that was in that circle, and that's going to be a trend you're going to recognize. You see, I tried not to stay on him too long there. I might have even been on him too long right there, but that's okay. You can always typically make up for it. That guy actually survived, so that kind of ruined our rotation there. Let's go ahead and get Xiangling's Q before Bennett's is up. Get him back into rotation and get the reverse vaporizes going. And yeah, and basically you can just repeat this ad nauseum as much as you want, getting vaporizes and non-vaporizes as much as possible. And you can see we cleared that floor very, very easily, and that is just kind of where he shines, is helping your supports shine even more while still doing good damage himself. Hopefully those were some perfect examples of how to take advantage of Tartaglia the most, as he is one of my favorite characters to play, and you can see when you get the damage numbers going, he can do a lot for your team, and I particularly really enjoy him. And if you really like his aesthetic, you really like his gameplay, then I highly suggest you pull for him. And if you have him and you don't have him built, then you really need to, as he can be a ton of fun to play once you learn how to work around the cooldown timer on his mechanic there. That is definitely a big caveat there, because if you stay on it too long and he has a long cooldown, he just doesn't feel that good. I will say that for sure. So as soon as you learn to play around that, he's a ton of fun. But anyway, that's going to be it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know your thoughts on Tartaglia, the fact that he has a third banner, how your Tartaglia build is going for you, or any other videos you might want to see in the future, as I love to see those things in the comment section below. But other than that, my name is Blossums, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Peace.